everyone, and welcome back to unDUBBED, where we're unscripted, uncensored, and undeniably data. We're here today to have another episode in the series of What Makes a Great. And we threw this one out open to our followers on LinkedIn and gave them a few different options. 67% of people decided that they wanted to hear about what makes a great work culture. So that's it. That's what we're rolling with today. Welcome to the episode, Sarah.
Thanks, Faye. Looking forward to it.
Also looking pretty schmick there. For people that are listening and tuning in, Sarah's got this beautiful black and white embroidered unDUBBED trucker hat.
What could possibly go wrong today?
Well, who knows? Really? It's one of our podcasts. Anything could go wrong. All right, let's get stuck into it. No point us rabbiting on. Why don't you kick it off with something that you reflect on that makes a great work culture?
Sophie, one of the big parts of work culture to me is having safety in the workplace. And, I'm not talking about hard hats and so forth. I'm talking about psychological safety. And it's really key. A lot of the big corps and I think smaller organizations now do have channels like Speak Up, but encouraging people to use them seems to be the trickier piece. Now, some of the examples that I've seen where it has worked is where you've got a leader that encourages people to use Speak Up when they need to and leans into that. You can have all the policies and processes in place, but unless you're talking about it actively, it's not going to work on the floor. So where I've seen it being really successful is when managers have said, hey, that thing that you've just come across, I think that's a Speak Up, and let's work on that together and go through the process together.
Interesting. I like that, having the manager to pitch in on it as well, because it could feel a little isolating for people. I've seen it work in pockets really well, but I also think at times there's a bit of lip service that does come through leadership, particularly those at the higher levels of an organization. Great call out though. Just establishing trust, really important in order for that process to work.
Yeah, completely agree. So Faye, you've just said a big key word here, trust. Now, I'm sure you've got something to say about trust and culture.
Spot on. You need to be able to trust what your leaders are saying in terms of a culture, and trust your peers as well, that they're not going to throw you under the bus. If you don't have that trust, you're constantly thinking, is someone out to get me? Can we really be productive when we don't have that foundation of trust? And I would say, nah, not at all. So trust is a big one for me, being able to know that people aren't jamming knives in your back, aren't undermining the projects that you've got, nodding along. Yes, I'll be involved in that in the meetings with all of the leadership team. And then next minute you hear that they're undermining the process, going off with their own project. So it's really important to establish trust throughout an organization.
Yeah, and when you've seen it go wrong a little bit, so there is a lot of that yes and then no, I've seen that as well. What are some of the things you think can culturally shift to mitigate that going forward?
The big word that comes out in front of mind for me is accountability. Sometimes accountability can feel like a massive weight, but when people see you taking accountability or responsibility for something and actually delivering on it, it furthers the trust that you build within organizations.
I like that, and looping back round to trust again, because it is such a cornerstone of great culture. Something else you mentioned is within accountability, it's having people that do come in and say, hey, actually, you're not being truthful, or pulling people up on where they are going a little bit off topic, having people that are also going to marshal that and be really responsible. So any specifics you want to talk about, Fee, in terms of work culture, any great shining beacons of work culture that you've had in your career where you've just gone, that's amazing, and I wish, everyone could replicate this?
Cultures that I really love working on is when it's where everyone rolls up their sleeves to help one another. And I suppose it's kind of like what I imagine the army's like, never leave someone behind. That creates that team unity along the way. And what that has meant for me in the past is, as a geek or an analyst, I've been pulled into stuffing envelopes for the marketing team because they're running late on a promo, or they've sat down with me while I've been coding something. And that means that none of them are leaving the office. We're all sitting in there until we really get the job done. And that makes me feel like I'm belonging to something that has a great purpose, but I'm not being left behind as it's happening. So that's been a really great experience for me in multiple organizations that I've worked in.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had that experience at all?
Yeah, I've seen that, and I do love it. I love it when everyone bands together and it's like, we've got to get this thing out the door. And I love your example of, it may not even be my thing or other people's thing, but they're all in the office. So let's see where we can help, whether it's stuffing envelopes or watching someone code or anything else in between. I think it's really important to show that camaraderie.
I love that word, camaraderie.
Almost didn't get it off my tongue then, but managed.
So what else, Sarah?
So one of the things I really enjoyed at one of my organizations was early on in COVID days, we all were all of a sudden on Zoom calls. It felt like 24/7. And we see a lot of what we call in human-centered design, the hippo. So the hippo is the highest paid person in the room. Now, when you're in a Zoom call, it's very equal all of a sudden because you're all the same size on the screen. And so you've got the highest paid person in the room, and they can quite often dominate the conversation. Everyone listens and doesn't want to respond. We noticed that really early on in our daily stand-ups where a new leader came in. No one really wanted to step out of line or say anything different. As a really great leader within the team, she would enforce round robin. So every time something of relevance that was said by the hippo, she would take note to go around the room and make sure that everyone got a voice. It was so uncomfortable to start with. So uncomfortable.
Is that, I think I've heard of hippo before. The way that it's been described to me is there's one slight add. So it's the highest paid person's opinion.
Sorry. Yes, you've got that right. I always just think of it as highest paid person in the room because that's the opinion we're listening to.
Yeah. I really like the way that they would go around and do the opinions of everyone else and do the circle. Thinking of a hippo, it just sounds like that they're going to back up that fat booty and squash everyone else's opinions along the way.
On that note, what else? What makes a great culture?
Perhaps one thing reflecting on our culture for DUBBED is that we have a lot of empathy, I think, for one another. In fact, candidly, people might think this is a bit weird, but I've cried the most in this organisation than any other organisation that I've worked in. And I think that comes back more to do with what's going on in our personal lives and being really empathetic to that and how that then impacts our professional lives as well. You know, let's be candid about it. You can't just have a brick wall between both. You know, there's things that leach in and out, that the way that we support one another and the way that we lead with empathy is a really incredible experience to be a part of.
I agree. And leaning into the crying. I mean, I was crying on the last podcast. There's equally for me, I'm not someone that normally cries at work, but hey, if it happens, it happens. It's great to have you there supporting me through it. And we're spending so much time together right now. I feel like we're in the room with each other all day anyway, which is also a great thing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a short one. Over to you.
Yeah, so I want to just go into maybe something a little bit more fun in the work culture. So some of the fun things that I've experienced is just around a bit of quirkiness. I used to have a manager, his name was Jono, and he used to insist on our Friday meetings that were in a big glass office at the end of a big board floor open to the finance department, that we would have YouTube Friday. Someone would have to find a YouTube clip. It had to be kind of under 3 minutes. And that was how we would introduce our meeting. and that would set the tone for the meeting. And at the end of every meeting, the next person was chosen. So you had a week to come up with something. And oh my gosh, some of the things, sometimes it was very serious and very, what was going on in the world. And other times it was just completely left field, and it would leave us all rolling around the floor in fits of laughter, and the whole finance department looking at us wondering why we were so happy. But, it gave us so much to talk about. That's important as well, is when you're communicating with these people that you're spending 40 hours a week with minimum, day to day, having something just completely random to laugh about. And one of the ones where I think was the high or low, depending, maybe research it, is a song called Willy Willy Bum Bum.
I'm going to leave that one there. I mean, we can have an explicit tag on the session. It's fine. Leaning in a little bit to that around having fun. We used to have a lot of corporate offsites, and maybe it's slowed down a lot with COVID and perhaps is not ramped up as much as the appetite for return to office. But hopefully we'll see more of those kind of activities occurring, because you find when you're bringing people together for an extended period of time, if it's 2 nights, it could be 3 days that almost, 2.5 days that you're spending together. Really, those times that you're not just doing the activities of the conference, but perhaps breaking bread together, that triggers the breakthroughs that you often have. People become more human. You get to really understand what drives them as people. You find things that you can connect with them on as well, which can really help to grease the wheels when you're working in some more high pressure environments. I hope to see more of those corporate offsites with spending time together and really trying to connect on the personal level.
I agree. And when I reflect back onto my last role here in New Zealand, we used to go to Waiheke Island every December just for a day. It was the team. It's probably, around 15 of us. Mm-hmm. And we'd start off the morning. We'd have to do a little bit of workshopping and things. But then by lunchtime, it was off to a vineyard, nice long lunch, couple of great wines. Waiheke Island, for those that don't know, is very famous for its wine collection, and I can actually just see it out of my window. It's a great island if you're ever in New Zealand to visit. What we got out of that, again, was a lot of laughter, a lot of jokes, and something to look forward to. We knew every December, when the weather was great, we were going to go away to Waiheke and have some good laughs together and, like you said, break some bread.
I have very vivid memories of going up north to far north Queensland and having activities, throughout the day. We'd have speakers come in. We'd be doing things together between the marketing and sales teams. The vibe was, electric. Then, next minute, we were split off into groups and we had to record something, dressing up as Steve Irwin along the way and, just getting you crazy on. We all watched the videos afterwards and had a good laugh. And, anyone who's trying to record a video that's not used to being a content creator really cringes at themselves. But the fact that people could let their egos down and just have a bit of fun, really personalized who the individuals were, and makes it a lot easier when, a problem's happening and you need to pick up the phone and go, hey, Bo, what's the story?
Yeah, having that connection and a slightly different connection out of the office environment is so important to get a different sense of who people are. Sometimes we can really just focus on, okay, this person does this job and I need this out of them. Going a little bit more around what they're open to tell you about around their personal life can be really important and can help you understand them a little bit more in their journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what else is on the list?
So another one for me is really around collaboration. I've spent a lot of time working with offshore teams, and one of a really great work culture that I unexpectedly walked in on in one of my roles was meeting a woman who led the offshore side of my team. Her name was Reka, and she was amazing. From the minute I met her, she just really, really wanted to collaborate with me. She knew the value of getting me on side and being on side. And, we would have so many great conversations. She really wanted to listen to what the direction I was steering, and she had great feedback. She really wanted to collaborate, and it wasn't lip service. It was, let's make this work together, Sarah. Your success is my success. Everything was based around teamwork and pulling things together. I had to have some tough conversations with her at times and mention members of her team that I didn't think were performing. And her response was always, I've got your back, Sarah. I know what I need to do, and I will help you get through this, and we will get it through together. And those are some of the things that made us in offshoring with her in that lead role so successful.
Oh my goodness, offshoring, whole nother game in terms of different cultures coming together and working, listening to what you were saying there. Funnily enough, you talk about she really listened to you. And our bestie PK has told us, go in and give people a good hard listening to. And that's actually resonated through other people that have worked with PK in the past, and they've told me the same thing. Give people a good hard listening to, and by the sounds of things, Reika absolutely did that. And I love that she was so aware that you would have mutual success if you could come together by doing it. Fantastic. It sounds like Reika would be a great person to have on our podcast at some point about how to work with the different global cultures. I want to continue a little bit on the culture side, but slightly adjacent. It's really important for leaders to hire people for fit on culture. So not just about what technical skills they have or even what soft skills they have, but indeed whether or not they would be a great fit for the type of culture that you've developed. So for instance, if you have a really strong culture of feedback where people actually have to present their work publicly and get feedback from the team, people who struggle to adapt to feedback or potentially have rejection sensitivities may really push back on this, and then they start to undermine your culture and your vision. So they become that voice of negativity. They're trying to say, this isn't great, and really, tearing things off the direction that the leaders are trying to put in place. So I think it's really important for leaders to hire for a fit on culture.
Yeah, I really like that. And it's something that you see some organizations do really well and others not. And I think I do wonder with having so much more data now and a lot of focus on soft skills and a lot of profiling, how that will evolve and improve potentially over time, getting that right cultural fit when hiring.
Yeah, 100%. It really leads from this new push, and I say new, a push in the last 4 or 5 years around diversity. But what happens when you pull a really diverse bunch of people together is if they don't share the same values, then they just tear one another apart. So it's really important to consider how you hire and what you're adding into the team and how this may evolve your culture, and is it the right ad to be doing in this space?
Yeah, I really like that. The other risk you can run if you've got pockets of competing cultures is you can almost form groups and silos, and that's when it gets really hard to get back out of.
Spot on.
Mm-hmm. So something else that's on my mind is around the culture of feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your thoughts? When I was reflecting on culture, I was looking at some of the programs around feedback that have been instilled, the 360 and some of the gamification. You can get badges or rewards and so forth if you do this feedback to certain people. And what's kind of some of your thoughts on that, Fee? Things that you've seen go well when.
So I've spent a lot of time in coaching teams for delivering feedback along the way. Now, there's two types of feedback. There's directive and there's suggestive. So Sometimes you are going to hear feedback where there's no choice, but you need to adapt or change. And some of that might be as much as changing a font or something on a presentation because it's not quite right. Or it can be actually changing your behavior and directive on that as well. I like when people are clear with me around, is this suggestive or is it directive up front? So I know it's really clear for me, what's expected of me through this process. So in a suggestive manner, I train people to talk about the things they like and also the things that they would suggest changing. And the reason why that's really effective is the individual that's receiving the feedback can take it on board or they can just push it to the side. So it's less confronting for people to adapt. It still is confronting, especially if they're hearing that feedback publicly from a group of people. But I've seen incredible growth from people who stick with it, go through it, experience it a few times, and then really start to see the value of what's happening.
So I like how you talk around being really clear around subjective or directive feedback. And it comes full circle to that trust build as well, because you're being very open and you're telling people that this is how you're going to deliver the feedback and for them to be able to trust in the process of what you're delivering and why.
Spot on. And then as a leader, knowing if you are giving directive feedback, you can tell if people are starting to shut down or if they can't take it anymore. You're saying, should we take a break on it? Should we, put a pin in it for now and come back? But being clear that you will come back and revert to the conversation. This isn't just a get out of jail free card.
Very nice indeed.
What else on feedback? Do you have some ideas on feedback?
Yeah, so I've seen feedback as a big journey that I think has evolved in the last couple of decades in terms of how we handle it. It's a thing that you give once a year and it hits you like a cannonball because your manager's not talked to you about it for the whole year. And I've struggled with that in the past, and as a result of that have made sure that, similar to you, that I'm giving constant feedback and I'm allowing my team or the peers, people around me to understand how I'm going to deliver that feedback as well. So I feel it's very much, to me, around giving feedback as close to the time it's required as possible, rather than saving it all up for an end of year review or something like that, which historically I really saw happen in my early days. So I'm glad that has evolved, and with tools that have come on, some of the organizations that I've worked in has allowed like a feedback circle, whether it's anonymous. Some of them have allowed that. So people that maybe don't feel as comfortable giving the feedback they want to. It's an interesting one. I'd rather it not to be anonymous, but I feel sometimes, people feel more comfortable doing it that way. The most important one is just making sure it's as open and honest as possible and that it's as close to the event as possible as well.
That's a really important one, being close to the event, because it'll be fresh in the mind of the person who you're delivering it to. It's also really important to ask for feedback. You and I had a call this morning. Straight after the call, I asked you for some feedback on it because we're still growing and learning, and having that third party as an observer as well on the things that I can improve on really helps. But I just want to circle back to one point that you made around the anonymity of feedback. Being anonymous doesn't give you the right to just
troll
or have verbal diarrhea and just offload a lot of your feelings and vent on people. Really put yourself in the shoes of the person that you're delivering feedback to and try and make it so that it's not just your feelings that have bubbled up, but constructive, that would help them to improve, whether it was their delivery of something or the way they went about it, the way that they spoke, whatever it is, help them to see your perspective. And if you really just run off at the mouth around it, they're going to feel shut down, feel defensive, and not really take that on board, because they're going to be like, oh, this person's just got a chip on the shoulder. And quite frankly, they'd be well within their rights to do that. So if you say something, you're like, oh, that was kind of came off wrong, be really vulnerable with that and say, oh, I didn't quite mean it like that. Let me try again and have another crack at it. This is really important to sharpening your own skills at delivering feedback along the way.
Yeah, I like that. The other thing that you've just highlighted is vulnerability as well. We're all human. Sometimes we don't get it right. You know, when you and I delivered our feedback session after our call today, what I loved about it is we were very vulnerable. And it's like, oh, yeah, I'll take note of that. And oh, yeah. And I think the other piece that I enjoyed about it is taking that time to reflect back. We kind of slowly pulled other bits out and had a really open, honest conversation around things that we would potentially change.
It was really great feedback, and I feel like that's another reason for a lot of growth in myself that I'm, having at the moment with running DUBBED.
Yeah.
So that segues really nicely into I love companies that encourage growth and learning. A uni degree shouldn't be the last time that you're investing in learning something new. Companies who dedicate the time to learning for their people is a huge win for me. And obviously at JLL, where part of my role was enablement, that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I saw the growth in individuals. Our retention rate was something like 7.8% over a period that in other parts of the organization it was over 20%, and more globally it was 35% in the data and analytics space. So that was obviously when a lot of people were transitioning over COVID and turning over jobs. People wanted to stay at JLL because we invested in their skill sets and capabilities with our gamification programs.
Now, for you to call that as a retention, is that not an attrition? Wouldn't your retention be in its knees? And your attrition?
Did I call it retention?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So the attrition was 7.8. That was really good retention on the other side. Thank you.
That's okay.
But I still love to this day seeing all of the achievements of those amazing people at JLL come through with their digital credentials. And it's a real buzz to see that they're continuing to focus on improving their skill set and capability.
Yeah. And learning is so key to culture. I think most of us really want to learn. Giving that time and space for people to learn while they're at work is your retention attrition statistics really highlight that. I've got a case specifically where a peer of mine called Leah, her and her team would have learning days. And I think it was on a Friday, and it might have been weekly or fortnightly, but that was their time. That was their no meeting time. And they were going to go and do dedicated learning. And I saw some really great stuff come out of that team. And I think it was because they took that time and that breathing space to go and learn the things that they needed to learn to do their jobs.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, at JLL, they had every Friday afternoon, that was, there was an hour for Viz reviews. So that's the feedback sessions. And then there was an hour for learning as well. So really setting that aside, at a time of the week that people just want the week to be over, they were actually investing in themselves, which was superb.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to add? I have plenty more.
I have so much more. On that continuous learning and development and asking for feedback and so forth. I've worked with some great people over my years, and I actually one woman, Hansini, she's worked for me a couple of different times, and something that I always loved around her feedback was she was always, hey Sarah, maybe this could have gone this way if we'd done it this. So she was always constantly pushing the boundaries and saying, what if we did it like this next time? And not being scared to come to her manager and being really direct. She'd always do a little bit of investigative work, I've just heard the team over here is doing this, and I think that's really successful because of X, Y, and Z. Maybe we should look at it as well. I really loved how she would think well outside the scope of our department and look at what others were doing and to take that on board. And I think back to the cultural side of it, it's building that trust where the leader is open and demonstrates that, where anyone can come in and have a suggestion and change a direction potentially.
Okay, I got another one. I think in a great culture, it means commitment to the vision.
Mm.
Now, the vision doesn't have to be the organization's vision, it could be your broader team's vision as well. But this means that people aren't nodding along to the vision, yeah, 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 yeah. But then they roll their eyes, they're like, totally don't believe in that. And they undermine what's actually going on. If you don't believe in the vision, get out. You'll be pushing against it. You won't really be bought in. You won't be energized by it. It's not going to rock your world to come to work every day because, sometimes work is just the grind. But if you really believe in what you're doing, the times at which it is just the grind will fly by because you'll be at the next stage of really trying to make that vision actually happen.
Yeah, I agree. And I like how you've said it doesn't have to be the organization's vision.
Mm.
And it's actually reminded me of a really good thing that a previous manager, Greg, used to do. And what he would do is we would have at the beginning of each year, we would have a 3-day workshop. And everyone in his department was pulled into rooms. We were offshore, so there was multiple rooms, but we would all get to have a say and we would all get to shape our department vision. And that meant that everyone bought into it. Everyone had a little piece of the puzzle to play, and they knew what their role was. They knew what their interest was, and it shaped it beautifully. And at the end of that workshop, we were all so pumped to go forward and deliver.
Greg sounds like an awesome leader.
He is.
Okay, another one for you, celebrating the wins. So, hands up, who's one of those people who does lots of projects, gets to the end, and then continues through into the next project or has 50 other projects on the go. That's definitely me.
Yes, me too.
And it's really easy because what are we doing? We're chasing solving problems because we all love to solve problems along the way. But it's really important to stop and smell the roses, making sure that teams and individuals are recognised where their efforts have culminated in success. Also, measuring that success as well is really important. If you have an ROI that you've delivered, being able to trumpet that out and it really embeds the value of your team along the way. Leaders making sure that they're celebrating the wins, making sure that they're giving people pats on the back. It doesn't just have to be like bonuses and all that kind of culture. It can be, a shout out on a Teams channel where there's lots of people on there and they're getting that recognition. Actually, I read some research a long time ago that said the biggest impact and change is when the individual's line manager says thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So simple, but they say, thank you so much. That's really amazing what you've done. I know that if you're getting 2.5% pay rises, that doesn't pay the bills along the way, but it is important to know that you are being noticed for what you're doing, and I'm sure that leaders who can will remunerate you if they're a great leader.
Yeah, and it's something that I see that I really love is at the end of a project having the stakeholder, and even if you're the project lead on it, sitting down with the stakeholder and saying, hey, these are the people that really went out of their way, can you put an email out to them? And over time maybe they'll just start doing it naturally. Having people see the impact of what they're doing upstream, I think, is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that can tear the culture apart, and I just sort of referred to it a little bit there, is bonuses. Depending on the size of a bonus in an organization, those bonuses can put such monetary incentives in place that people just want to play their individual game instead of the team game. And so if the KPIs aren't aligned, it's very quickly, it dissolves into people doing a lot of that, yes, 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 I'm going to be involved, into there's no way that I'm spending any time on Sarah's program because I've got this big bonus that's sitting over my head and I need to focus on my project, which will deliver that.
Yes, yeah, the bonus culture is a very interesting one that I've seen through many different organizations, and I completely agree. You don't want it to be the sole reason why people do every single thing and they calculate it, right? Yeah, really agree on that one. You were talking a little bit around, ways that people can feel appreciated. Something that I always liked and one of my managers, Sean, used to do is unofficially, he would always say, when it's your birthday, you get a day off. And I know other organisations that have had duvet days or doona days, as they call them in Australia. So it's just that kind of little thing that's not through the HR department. It's off on the side, but it says, hey, I appreciate you, and why not take your birthday off? Or, hey, if you're not feeling the greatest, one day you wake up and you just want to effectively call a sickie, but let's not call it a sickie. Let's actually give it a better name, a doona day or a duvet day. And I think as we evolved, they became, during COVID, became mental health days as well. It's like, I'm just not fronting up today. And I think having a culture where that is okay is great as well.
Any final thoughts?
Oh, well, I feel we're only touching the tip of the iceberg on this, and there's so many great things that people can do when it comes to improving their work culture and what makes a great culture. I just hope that this podcast has inspired people to make a little change, to move the needle just a little bit in how they work with their colleagues or work as a leader, or encourage their leaders to maybe improve their culture just a little bit. What about you, Fee?
I love that. My final thoughts is around work culture. Also, make sure that you've got a data-driven culture.
Of course.
And with that thought, I think that we can wrap up today's podcast. Thanks so much for all of your amazing insights, Sarah. I've had a blast.
Me too. Thanks, Fee. Catch you later,
Bye.
everybody.